Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. Just wanted to let you know that this is being recorded for later viewing. So with that, we'll get started. So hello, my name is Adriana Cutler, and I am a Senior Program Officer in the Division of Preservation and Access at the National Endowment for the Humanities and the coordinator of the Preservation Assistance Grants for Smaller Institutions program. Thank you for coming to today's webinar. Thanks also to my colleague, Program Analyst Sarah Bateman, who will be assisting me with Q&A today. Today we'll go over what Preservation Assistance Grants, or PAG, can fund, share some examples of previously funded projects, and go over how you can apply for an award. I'll offer some suggestions for writing a good application and answer some frequently asked questions. That should leave us with plenty of time to discuss a few of your own project ideas and answer any of your specific questions. Please type your questions into the chat box, which Sarah will be monitoring during the presentation. And note that closed captioning is available. Just click on the three dots at the top of your screen and then go to More Features, and then select Turn on Live Captions. And as I said before, this webinar is being recorded, and so you will receive an email with a link to the video on YouTube in the coming weeks. So the Preservation Assistance Grants Program is administered by NEH's Division of Preservation and Access, which is one of the 7 divisions and offices that run grant programs. We recognize that in smaller organizations, implementing preservation needs may happen incrementally. Therefore, this program is designed to cover a wide range of needs, to encourage repeat applications, and to support a combination of preservation activities. At its heart, the point of this program is to enable small and mid-sized organizations to build their institutional capacity, often by bringing in outside experts in conservation and preservation to provide advice, help develop preservation plans, and provide preservation or collections management training. For those institutions who have never had one, we often recommend starting with a general preservation assessment by a qualified consultant, whose preservation skills and expertise are related to the types of collections that are the focus of your project. For instance, you may require a conservator with a specialty in objects or paper or paintings. Similarly, you will want to find a consultant who is knowledgeable about the preservation of collections in your type of institution, whether a library, archive, museum, or other cultural heritage organization. These assessments give organizations a roadmap with the steps they'll need to take to improve the physical care and intellectual control of their collections. Assessments also provide recommendations for preservation supplies and equipment, such as acid-free storage boxes, archival photo sleeves, archival shelving, or environmental monitoring equipment, such as data loggers or light meters, which may be purchased with PAG awards. This program can also fund more specific consultations with preservation and conservation professionals, such as digital preservation assessments, conservation assessments, and the development of disaster preparedness and response plans. Finally, institutions may also request funds through a general PAG request for education and training in preservation and collections care for their staff and volunteers. As you can see on this slide, PAG awards are up to $10,000. Your project may take up to 18 months to complete, beginning in as early as September 1st in the year that you apply. Funding requests can be for any one or a combination of these activities. Although PAG awards can fund many activities, conservation treatment and digitization or other methods of reformatting are not eligible. This year, we have also added a slate of new eligible activities that can be done on their own or in combination with other eligible activities to help you more holistically address your collections, preservation, and collections management needs. The first is that along with hiring preservation consultants, you can also fund consultations with source communities and scholars. This can look like consulting with a source community to determine culturally appropriate preservation practices or to document community rules around access. Another example is working with a scholar to help provide contextual information for items in your collection that may be missing descriptions, so that you can determine and prioritize future preservation and collections management needs. The next addition is the expansion of the types of plans and policies that you can develop. Along with preservation plans and disaster preparedness plans, you can also use PAG funds to develop or update collection management plans, collecting plans, loan policies, processing manuals, and digitization plans. For many of these policies, plans, and manuals, it can be helpful to hire a consultant with the appropriate expertise that complements the skills of your staff as needed to assist you. Finally, we've also formally added the ability to use PAG funds for activities such as format surveys, inventories, and condition reports. This will allow you to use funds to do things such as update location information in your collections management systems as you rehouse a collection, or add information from condition reports from a conservation assessment. Our hope is that by adding these kinds of activities to the program, that we will be able to support your preservation and collections management needs in a way that better reflects the way in which you are already doing this work in tandem. Along with expanding our funded activities, I also wanted to highlight a few other changes you'll find in the updated guidelines. First, while you can still apply for disaster preparedness and planning activities, such as developing disaster response plans, disaster response training, and purchasing supplies for disaster response kits, we have sunset our disaster response encouragement that also allowed conservation and other activities in response to a federally declared disaster. Instead, we recommend that if you are impacted by a federally declared disaster, that you contact your state humanities council for more immediate disaster relief funding. NEH is working with the state councils as much as possible to distribute funding in these events. Second, I wanted to call your attention to a change in funding restrictions. We are no longer restricting PAG funds use towards software or cloud storage purchases or licenses. That said, it will still be important in your applications to justify your software or cloud storage purchases if they are a part of your project. Finally, given that many of these kinds of systems require continued funding, it will be important to demonstrate how you will sustain these costs after the grant period. Now that we've gone over both the funded activities and major updates to the program, here are a few examples of funded projects to give you a better sense of what they look like. Elizabeth City State University in North Carolina received an initial award supporting a general preservation assessment of the university archives, documenting the history of one of the nation's oldest historically Black colleges and universities. Based off this assessment, they subsequently received 4 more PAG awards to fund the purchase of archival shelving for different parts of the collection, including manuscripts and publications, photographs and film negatives, and items housed in cold storage. This is an example of a case where the institution, Elizabeth City State University, is larger, but the unit within it, the archives, is smaller. The Carrick Tribe of California received an award to purchase environmental monitoring and preservation supplies and trained staff in their use to support the collection's care of necklaces, clothing, historic photographs, and basketry that document the pre-contact life and culture of the tribe, which are housed in the Carrick Tribe People's Center. The Chicago Film Archives hired a consultant to perform a digital preservation assessment, which provides recommendations for how best to preserve born digital and digitized collections. The project also resulted in a digital collections policy for the archive's over 25,000 and growing collection of films, prints, videotapes, audio tapes, and ephemera, reflecting life in the Midwest between 1903 and the late 1990s, which now amount to over 20 terabytes of data. The Genesee Country Village and Museum in New York hired a consultant to assist them with developing an emergency response plan and train staff in disaster response activities and how to work with first responders and other partners. They also purchased supplies to be better prepared for potential future emergencies at the museum's John L. Wheel Gallery, which houses paintings, drawings, prints, and sculptures from the 17th century, illustrating the lives of New Englanders and regional Quakers. Our final example is from the Rollins College Digital Archive from Winter Park, Florida, which hosted a 2-day Preserving Digital Objects with Restricted Resources, or it is more commonly known, POWER, workshop. for their staff and 23 participants from across the southern United States. For the archivists at Rollins and similar organizations who do not currently have in-house systems for the long-term preservation of digital assets or the resources to outsource this work, the workshop provided training in digital preservation activities, such as performing fixity checks, capturing automated metadata, and migrating files. Additionally, the cohort who attended the training expanded the community of digital preservation practitioners within the region. This is a great example of hiring consultants to train your organization staff, but also opening up the training to neighboring institutions, allowing for the building of your local preservation community. Now that you have an idea of the kinds of activities that can be funded, let's go over who can apply and how. Applicants must be either U.S. nonprofit organizations, specifically 501c3s, institutions of higher education, state and local government agencies, or federally recognized tribal governments. Individuals and foreign and for-profit organizations are not eligible. Applicants must also show that they care for and have custody or responsibility for the collections that are the focus of the application. Have at least one staff member or full-time equivalent, paid or unpaid, and make their collections available for research, education, and/or public programming purposes. Along with our programmatic encouragements, we also want to encourage certain institution types and communities to apply. That includes small and mid-sized organizations that have never applied to NEH for an award, community colleges, tribal colleges and universities, historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, Native American tribes, and Native Alaskan and Native Hawaiian organizations, and other collecting institutions whose humanities collections highlight historically excluded communities. If your organization does not line up with one of these areas, you should absolutely still apply. The encouragements are meant to signify particular interests of ours, but they are not meant to privilege certain types of projects or applicants. By now, you're probably wondering what you need to include in your proposal. Knowing that most of our applicants to this program are in small organizations, we try to make the application process as straightforward as possible. The main component of a PAG application is the project narrative. This is a 5-page, single-spaced document where you will describe your collections and the activities you would like to undertake, and answer questions that help address the review criteria. Before sitting down to write your narrative, you may want to do some information gathering with colleagues, audience members, or other stakeholders. Get a good sense of your organization's mission, the scope and content of your collections, your audience, and what you provide for them. If the general public is a large portion of your audience, think about how that breaks down. Are they genealogists, families, lifelong learners, K-12 schools and universities in your area? Gather some numbers to help illustrate your case. How many visits do you get a year? What about research requests? Can you clearly quantify your collections? Those hard numbers can say a lot. And be sure to have a good sense of previous preservation work or established priorities. This should make the writing a bit easier. It is okay, and in fact, actually preferable, to format your narrative in a short answer approach. Listing the questions as they appear in the guidelines, called the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO for short, and then your response. It is also important to be clear upfront regarding for what activities you are seeking funding. Then you will want to describe the contents and size of the humanities collections that are the focus of the project, how they are currently used, and how the proposed project would increase access and use of said collections. Tell us why your collections are significant locally and regionally, and ways that they may fit in with national themes in American history. Including some interesting and specific examples from within your collection will help strengthen your case. You will then need to describe the nature and mission of your institution and state whether your organization has ever received a preservation or conservation assessment, or what other plans, policies, or procedures your project will follow or is based on. You'll also want to discuss the importance of the project to your institution and how you plan on sustaining project outcomes. For example, if your project is to receive a preservation assessment, what will be your next steps to begin addressing the recommendations? Or if you are implementing cloud storage for your digital collections, how will your institution sustain the cost after the grant period? Finally, you will want to discuss the project staff and consultants and their qualifications. In addition to the narrative, we ask you to include some supporting information to bolster your case for funding. All applicants must submit a budget and budget justification, which is a written explanation of the line items in your budget. If your project includes voluntary cost share, this is where you would indicate it. Your total on your budget form should be equal to your total request from NEH. Another requirement is the inclusion of a detailed work plan, where you outline the specific steps to achieving your project's goals. You may want to format this as a bulleted list, table, or Gantt chart. A monthly or quarterly breakdown is often a helpful level of detail, and you should also make note of who's working on what. Also, don't forget to build in a little padding time. If reasonable for your project, we recommend requesting the full 18 months allowed. After the last few years, we all know that unexpected emergencies arise and shipments arrive late, causing unexpected delays to your project. Finally, all applicants must include resumes or CVs for the staff and consultants participating in the project. Applicants who are requesting funds for a consultant must also include a letter of commitment from said consultant, and we highly recommend that applicants requesting only supplies or equipment include the previous assessment on which their request is based. While not required, other supporting documents, including workshop descriptions and other documentation, are encouraged. For example, if your project includes activities such as surveys or basic description, we recommend including the relevant policies and procedures. If your project includes any self-assessment components, we recommend including the framework or toolkit you will be using. Please be sure to consult the application component table in the NOFO for a full list of forms and documents that must or may be included in your application package, as well as suggested page limits. As you prepare to compose your application, I highly recommend reading the sample narratives we have listed on the program resource page on the NEH website. You don't have to imitate them, but you can use them as an example of how someone else made a case for their project, and they can help you think about the structure and form. For more tips on what makes a good proposal and the application process in general, please read the Tips on Applying for Preservation and Access Award at the top of our blog, and we'll post a link in the chat for you as well. As I mentioned when discussing the narrative portion of the application, the program has specific review criteria that we ask our panelists to consider when reading your proposal. Here are the criteria for PAG. As you can see, these criteria focus on the significance of the materials, the appropriateness of the work plan, and the qualifications of the staff. The criteria are included in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, and I recommend you print them out or keep them open on your computer so that you can have them top of mind as you are writing your application. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that you start thinking about the logistics of submitting your application as soon as possible. Applications to NEH are submitted through a web portal called grants.gov. It is a fairly smooth system, but it will be good for you to spend some time getting familiar with it before you submit your application. Along with grants.gov, you will also need to be registered with sam.gov, or the System for Award Management. These registrations can take up to 1 month, so I recommend checking your registration status or working with your Office of Sponsored Projects, if you have one, early on in the application process so that you don't encounter any issues when it is time to submit your application. You may also need to make a login.gov account, which is quick and easy, or set up a unique entity identifier, or UEI number, which may take a little more time. The next deadline is 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on January 11th, 2024. I recommend submitting your application a day or two in advance. That way, if your application is rejected for a technical reason, such as an invalid file type, you have a chance to correct the issue and resubmit before the deadline closes. Unfortunately, we are only able to give extensions in cases of major weather events such as hurricanes or floods, or if the grants.gov system is down itself. Should you need any assistance with the technical submission process, grants.gov support is available 24/7. Please follow the requirements and naming conventions described in the NOFO carefully as you develop the PDFs that you will upload into grants.gov, and make sure that the PDFs are flat files. Full details on grants.gov, SAM, and login.gov are in section D3 of the NOFO. Full details on submitting your application are in section D4. Every NEH grant application goes through a process of peer review. Applications are sorted into panels with regard to institution or collection type. For instance, historic house museums, public libraries, art collections, and library special collections. Then my colleagues and I identify people like you working in your field. Each review panel typically includes administrators in smaller organizations, content specialists, and conservators or other preservation specialists. They will evaluate the applications based on the criteria we went over, assign a rating, and write comments. NEH staff then takes these panel recommendations to the July meeting of the National Council on the Humanities, pictured here, a board of 26 humanities professionals appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. The NEH chair, who has the sole authority to grant funding, takes all these recommendations into account when making award decisions. All this means that your application is being evaluated by people like you, people who know the humanities and who understand the work you do. Once the chair has made final decisions, notifications will go out sometime in August. After awards are announced, all applicants may request to see the reviewer's written comments. These can prove helpful for improving a funded project or developing an application for resubmission if an application was not successful this time around. Preservation and access staff are always available to answer your questions. But here are a few we receive frequently that I am happy to answer now. Many institutions call us wondering if they would be considered small or mid-sized. Because we work with so many different institution types, like museums, libraries, and historical societies, it is not possible for us to give a clear-cut answer based on factors such as collection size, staff, or budget. Instead, we invite you to make the case for how your institution is small or mid-sized compared to other like organizations in your area. I will also note that smaller units within larger institutions, such as a university museum or archive, generally fit this definition. And please note that this is not one of the review criterion. If you would like to see a list of more projects that have been funded through PAG, you can click the Search All Past Awards link toward the bottom of the NEH websites. There's also another link on the PAG program page for recently funded projects. Many applicants also ask us how they can find a consultant. Generally, you will want to find a preservation specialist whose expertise is aligned with the type of collections you have and with your institution type. While we cannot recommend specific consultants, you can find links in Section H of the NOFO that will help you with your search. Finally, I wanted to share a few additional general NEH resources that may assist you, especially if you are a first-time applicant. The first is a recording of an introductory webinar for small and mid-sized organizations about the NEH application process. The second is a general set of NEH application tips, available in both English and Spanish. Now we would like to open the floor up to questions.
So Adriana, I have a few questions already. The first is, can we apply for cold storage equipment with this grant?
That's a great question. So yes, technically you can. So we have definitely funded freezers and refrigerators for different levels of cold storage in the past.
And then with this grant, could we purchase a digital repository software?
Yes, so with our new sort of expansion of what is allowable and what is not, that is no longer a restricted activity and could be funded.
And then from Meredith, she asks, regarding using the full 18 months, does the work plan need to show grant-related activities for all of that time? Or is it okay to buffer activities with a couple-week break when presumably we're doing other non-grant related work activities for those of us who will be completing this grant, but also will have other work assignments?
Yeah, I think the way you would want to present that within the actual sort of work plan, I think it's okay to have some gaps, especially, for example, if you're working, say you're working with a consultant. Well, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get the consultant to be able to come to your institution or ready for a digital, sometimes they do a virtual consultation. But, before that, you'll have been working with the consultant to set up that time frame. You will have been possibly doing some actual sort of pre-consultation surveys of the questionnaires that they want you to answer. And then there's, of course, time after the consultation where they're working on the report. And so, I don't think you would necessarily have to be as exact as like, well, we're doing this day, and this day, and then these days we're not doing anything. But I think you can kind of like buffer out that spacing. So, it's taking 1 to 2 months to get everything set up for the consultation, another 2 months to work on the report. This is the month which they're going to be doing the consultation, and these are the, the 2-3 months they have after to do the report. And then after that, we have the report, we're going to speak with them about the report and review the report ourselves, and that's another, 2 or 3 months. And so I think you can sort of spread it out that way, so that you can, make it clear that, you do need that full time, even if not every second is being focused on the project. I hope that makes sense.
And then from Jennifer, she's asking if can we use grant funds to hire part-time help to accomplish an inventory?
Yes, you absolutely can. So, I know for some folks who may have experience with this program in the past, for many years, staff time was not an eligible expense. You were not allowed to use PAG for staff, but you are now. Actually, it's been quite a few years now that staff time is eligible, and I think that includes also hiring. Because of course you're hiring outside consultants, it could include hiring some outside project staff. It can also include funding for, if you're going to have paid internships as part of the folks helping to work on the project. So absolutely. I mean, the thing to keep in mind, of course, is that $10,000 is the limit of the award amount. So you'll just want to make sure that the amount of funding that you're putting towards staff time is actually sort of commensurate. It works with the amount of time that they are putting into the project itself.
And then Allison asks, my small organization is hoping to use the fund to consult on how to preserve materials and cover cost in implementing these recommendations. I presume a consultant can help us estimate a budget for their assessment and consulting, but I'm not sure how we may justify a budget for implementing their recommendations. Any advice on how to justify this aspect in our budget?
Sure. So I'm trying to see if I can understand that question properly. So is it that you're seeking, I'm wondering if it's that they're seeking for just time after the consultation to try to figure out the next steps budget, or if it's that they're looking for work with the consultant to figure out the budget for how to implement. I think if it's working with the consultant, they're going to give you a report that's going to have recommendations. I think, you could always ask as part of that report that they give you some more specific recommendations of actual materials, supplies, and work that you would need done and what those might cost. I think that's appropriate to have them sort of include that as part of their final report. And in many cases, for some of these projects too, for example, if you're requesting a consultation, and then also many of the consultants, depending on what you're requesting the consultation for, can also, even before the project starts, from just speaking with you about getting this project together, give you an initial list of supplies that you might need to implement some of the likely recommendations that they would have. So for example, they can recommend certain rehousing supplies, and you can already sort of include that as part of your full project budget. If the assessment is, say, only going to take $6,000 or $8,000, and then there's $2,000 left, and you wanted to be able to start purchasing some initial rehousing supplies, that's something that you could do. And the consultant would be able to provide you with a list of recommended supplies so that you can include that within your application to already begin purchasing those supplies from the get-go. And then, of course, you can also, that's like an initial list. Once the consultant has actually done the full consultation, they can, of course, refine that list, and then you can buy those sort of refined, updated materials instead of just necessarily focusing with the initial list. But yeah, I hope that answers the question. I think it sort of depends on where you're looking for assistance with figuring out the budget for some of the implementation.
And then Deanna asks if projects that have already started qualify.
So we can't fund work that is already done, but if you're working on a project and you're going to need more funding for future phases of your project, then absolutely. So, for example, we always recommend folks to have an assessment first to really help them sort of get that roadmap of where they need to go with their preservation work. That assessment doesn't have to be funded through us. Many assessments are funded through a number of other funders, both state and local funders, federal funders, and you can bring the work that you receive from that assessment and come to us to help implement some of the recommendations from that assessment. So that's sort of the way that I would recommend thinking about it. We can't fund work that's already happened, but we can fund future work that you need in all of the various phases of your projects.
And then Kara asks, if we're receiving funding from other sources and doing a voluntary cost share, how should this information be included on the budget forms? Do we include the budget for a whole project, even if this grant would only partially fund it?
That's a great question. So this is the way I would recommend it. Well, first off, in the budget form itself, you really just want to show what you're requesting NEH funding for. If you want to show voluntary cost share, you would want to show that just in the budget narrative and not in the budget form. In terms of, funding from other funders, you also want to make sure that you're not sort of cross-pollinating the funding. So, we can't fund something that you're already receiving funding for somebody else. The monies have to go to two distinct different things. They can be done in tandem. They can be different parts of the same overall project, but we just have to fund different components. So like we can't have, one staff member, getting funding from two different places, or we can't both be buying the preservation supplies. So really what you would want to do is to show, if you want to show voluntary cost share, because of course many projects are going to be bigger than a $10,000 award, then you'll want to, show that in the budget narrative, not the budget form, and you'll just want to be very specific that the funds from NEH are going to these costs and the voluntary cost share funds are going to these separate costs.
And then Jackie asks, we are a museum that houses 14 historical buildings. The consultant we want to work with is an architecture firm that has expertise in historical building preservation. Would this qualify?
That's a great question. So unfortunately, this program can't fund building preservation. So it's really focused on collections, the things that are inside the buildings itself. We understand that, especially in places like a historic house, oftentimes this can be a little bit sort of muddled as to what's the collection and what is the house. We do, in what's storage and what's not storage, we do certainly understand in those sort of areas that there's a little bit of overlap, but these projects are focused on the way to help the collections inside of your buildings and, what either you need to do to help make the environment appropriate for those collections. For historic preservation, if you're really looking at focusing on the outside of the building, making sure it continues to stay historically accurate, there are other funding sources for that. One I highly recommend is a program called Save America's Treasures. That one actually has a deadline coming up in December. It's another great program that can fund a variety of things. Some overlap with this program and some of our other programs as well, but I would really recommend looking at that program. And we do have a link from our website to get to the information for that program. So I recommend Save America's Treasures for historic building preservation work.
And then Jeff asks, does our museum have to already be open to the public to qualify for this grant? We are planning to open in the first quarter of 2025.
That's a great question. So technically, as long as you are already a not-for-profit 501c3, you are eligible. When it comes to thinking about, access to the collections, I think that's sort of the way you would need to be thinking about framing that argument. So how would this project increase access and to those collections, by preserving them for future use in the museum through public programming, by making them available for researchers? In what ways are you going to make the collections available to the public and to researchers and scholars? And so that's really, how you would need to frame that if it's an organization that is not open quite yet.
And then Alicia asks, can we use funds for cloud savings for an unlimited time? And do we need a consultant?
I'm sorry, sir, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so the question is posed, can we use funds for cloud savings for an unlimited time? I'm wondering if it's cloud storage for an unlimited time, and do we need a consultant?
Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, so in theory, you can use cloud storage. In terms of having needed a consultant, it really is going to be depending on the sort of the skills that your staff already has. So if you have staff in your organization that are knowledgeable in digital preservation, that have that background, that can really speak to that work and have done that work in the past, then you may not need a consultant to assist you with deciding what's the appropriate cloud storage and what how to set that up. If you don't have those, if you don't have anybody in your organization who has that sort of digital preservation background or understanding, then I would recommend hiring a consultant to help you with that process. In terms of using the cloud storage, yeah. So basically, the funds are for the grant period, so they're really only available for the 18 months. After that's where you really need to show that your organization is committed to sustaining that cloud storage beyond the grant period and how you would do so.
And then Carolyn asks, can funding be applied to cover professional digitization of collection items?
Yeah, so unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, digitization itself and reformatting of collections is not eligible in this program. Neither is conservation work. So both of those activities can be funded through one of our programs called Humanities Collections and Reference Resources. It can also be funded through the Save America's Treasures program that I mentioned earlier. And that's actually one that I really recommend small and mid-sized organizations look to for either conservation or digitization funding.
And then from Filene, we have, could you say more about a smaller unit within a larger organization? Our organization is a 30-year historic botanic garden. The garden is well established as a living collection, but the extensive historical collection has not been a past focus. We would like to develop a preservation program for the non-living collection. What is the best way to present our case?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so that is something that we have funded in the past. We have funded libraries, archives, and special collections from botanic gardens. And so, I think that's really the way you would sort of present that. I'm not sure if within your organization you already have those historic collections set up as a separate office within your organization, but that absolutely qualifies as a small organization.
Then Leanne asks if indirect costs can be included in the budget.
Yes, they can. So for indirect costs, if your organization has a negotiated rate with the federal government, you can use that rate. I will note that we typically don't accept the scientific research rate from colleges and universities. There's a different rate for humanities type projects that is typically lower, which we will accept from organizations that have a negotiated rate. If you do not have a negotiated rate, then you can request up to 10% of your budget. That said, it's only a $10,000 award. You also don't have to request indirect costs. It really just depends on your needs, your organization's requirements. And so I hope that answers that question.
And then Gina asks, we have a local historical museum focusing on the city's history, and we also have one that is for the county. Can applications be submitted for both?
Yes, they absolutely can. They seem like two separate organizations within a larger organization. Both can apply. Same thing at a university. You could have both your archives and museums apply with different projects. That said, you're in competition with yourself, but there's no sort of limits on that.
And then Kara presents a really specific grants.gov question regarding the address. If our mailing address is different from our physical address, how should we list this information?
That is a good question. And I think that's probably one I'll have to ask you to defer to grants.gov because I am not sure if that impacts anything at this point. It certainly would not impact your application to us in terms of being eligible or being reviewed. So I would just recommend reaching out to the grants.gov help desk to find the answer for that one. I'll also note too that I don't think it will impact the way you would receive an award, since all of the awards are, of course, done direct deposit at this point.
And then Amy asks, what sort of consultant will we be looking for to help us make collections available for research to the public?
That is a good question. So it really kind of depends on what are the needs of the collection. So for example, if the issue is that your collections are just in a state where you don't have them organized, you just sort of have them in a room, you don't have any sort of they're in boxes, they're not organized. You may need an initial sort of just preservation assessment to make sure to kind of get that initial step of how do we actually make sure these physical collections are in a state that we're able to use them for, exhibitions or education purposes, or in a way that we're able to allow researchers to come in and actually view the items. If you're thinking about it from more of a sense of, we need to better understand what we have in our collections and what is their historical significance, that's where you would be bringing in a scholar to help you actually review what you have in your collections and who are the kinds of researchers or audiences that would be interested in what are the historical sort of stories that are being told through those collections.
Now that was our final. Oh, we just got another one. So Stephanie asked, you said the narrative is 5 pages, single spaced. Is there a form we will be, is there a form we will fill out using the online system?
Thanks. Yeah, so the narrative is actually most of the documents. There are a couple like technical forms that you will use, but it won't be for the narrative. The narrative itself, you will be just writing probably in Microsoft Word or in some other, sort of document editor. And that's where you'll be doing that. There's some other very specific, rules around like the size of the font and the margins. So please do look at the NOFO for those. But really, you'll just be doing that and saving it as a flat PDF. And that's really key. They have to be flat PDFs. They can't be PDFs that then have either sort of working signature components, or they can't be PDFs that have folders within them, because our system will not accept them. So even if grants.gov accepts your files, for example, we'll have a lot of applications that'll come through as people will submit the budget form, which is a PDF form, and then they will attach the budget narrative and forget to save that as a PDF and attach it as a Word document and think, oh, well, it's attached to a PDF, so it's okay. Unfortunately, it won't work. Even though grants.gov will accept it, our system at NEH will kick it back to you. So just to know that really you're mostly doing all of these things, in Word or in those kinds of formats, but then you have to save everything to a PDF, and then there's sort of an attachment form in grants.gov that you will actually add everything to.
Then our next question is from Deborah. Maui, Puerto Rican has been in existence for over 43 years. We would like to modernize our tons of photos in digital. Will this grant help to hire a consultant to do this?
So I'm trying to see if I can understand the exact activities that they're looking for. So if you're looking to digitize your photos, if you're looking to convert your photographs to digital, that is not something, unfortunately, that this program can fund. That is reformatting or digitization, and we don't fund that through this program. As I mentioned before, the Save America's Treasures program can help with digitization, as well as the Humanities Collections and Reference Resources program.
And then Anne asks, will you review or comment on a draft narrative?
So unfortunately, because of the volume of applications that we get in this program, we don't read draft narratives, but we do offer a lot of other forms of consultation. So we highly recommend that you email us, call us. We can set up appointments to go over your projects, what you're looking at, applying for, making sure that everything is eligible. If you have questions about how to make that case for the humanities significance, we're happy to discuss that with you. We can answer a lot of specific questions, but we just can't read a completed draft of the applications.
So our next question is from Marty. I'm asking if successful applications are available to view or just descriptions of successful applications. I'm going to go ahead and put a link to our main PAG webpage. And on that webpage, you're going to see a selection of sample application narratives. And then Adriana, I don't know if you want to add anything further to that.
No, thank you, Sarah. That is perfect. That's exactly right. Yeah, we do have sample narratives. So it is just the 5-page narrative that you will get. It won't include the budget. It won't include the attachments, but you can at least see how other applicants have that have received awards have made the case for their projects in that 5-page narrative. And then also I'll just add that if you don't see, if one of those sample narratives doesn't quite match either your institution type or the kind of project that you're looking for, and you're looking to see something a little more aligned with the project that you have in mind, and you see that maybe there was another project that you found in searching the brief descriptions that are available through the just project search that aligns better with that, you can also always do a Freedom of Information Act or FOIA request to get the narrative for that. I will say that we try to process those as quickly as possible. It may take a little while, so that may not be the best route always, but it is an option that's available. And of course, we do try to update these sample narratives as much as we can. Because we've just opened up some new activities, you're not going to see those reflected in the sample narratives this time around. But as we get some applications and awarded projects that fit some of those newer activities, we will definitely refresh those sample narratives so that you can see some of that in the future.
And then Filene asks if award amounts so are award amounts reduced from the requested amount?
Sure. So the only reason that award amounts would be reduced from a requested amount is if there's a discrepancy in the budget. So say, for example, or two reasons. One is if there's a discrepancy. So for example, if you submit a budget that states that the consultant is going to cost X, but the letter from the consultant says a different amount that's lower, then that might be adjusted in the final budget. The only other reason would also be is if you do request an activity that ends up being ineligible, but but the agency decides through the panel review process that they still want to fund the portion of your project that is eligible, then you would get an offer for the eligible portion and not the portion that was ineligible. But generally, we tend not to reduce the award amounts for any other reasons.
And then at this time, that is our final question.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. Oh, see another question popping in, I guess. I was gonna say we can stop, but you know, happy to stay on for a few more minutes. We definitely have a little bit more time if folks have other questions. So I see that somebody's wanting to sign up for the mailing list. We will definitely send out you know, this webinar to you all. And so in that email, we'll be able to share with you the sign up for the mailing list. Yeah, unfortunately, through this webinar system, you can't just click on the link, but we will make sure to get those links to you. And thank you, Sarah, for putting the link directly in the chat. But we will definitely try to get the slide deck to all of you as well, so that you actually have the clickable links to those sections. So thank you all so much for coming. Please, 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 if you have any questions after today, you know, we would love to have you all email us, call us. We are live people. We are here and we answer the phones and we answer emails. We really are here to help you out. I think I do see a few more questions coming through the chat, even as we're winding up.
Do you want me to go ahead and read them for you?
Yes, please.
So from Zoe, she's asking, so you would fund the consultant assessment for tape health / status, but not the consultant for the digitization process?
Correct. So a consultant, you can do a conservation assessment and a preservation assessment. So I'm guessing this is for video and audio tape. So the consultant could sort of let you know what you need to do to both make sure to preserve that tape as its physical object. So ways that you may need to rehouse that tape so that you can help keep it from deteriorating further. And then recommendations for ways to get it digitized. We just unfortunately don't fund the actual sort of reformatting digitization in this program. As I said before, we do have a few other programs for that, so I recommend looking at those.
And then Jeff asked, what grant programs are available for exhibit design and installation?
Great question. So we have a another division at NEH called our Division of Public Programs, and they have a couple funding programs for exhibit design and installation for both single exhibits as well as permanent exhibits as well as touring exhibits. So I would highly recommend going to the NEH website, going to the Division of Public Programs, and thank you, Sarah, for putting their link in the chat as well. That is who you will want to talk to for the exhibition portion of any of the work that you would like to do. And they actually, I'll just mention too, they do have a new, just this past year started program for smaller organizations called Public Impact Projects at Smaller Institutions. So I highly recommend taking a look at that program for your exhibit needs.
And that is the final question.
Great. Well, again, thank you all so much for coming. We will get this webinar recording out to all of you as well as the slide deck. And please, please, please contact us with any questions along the way as you are looking to apply to the program.